In an age of unprecedented access to information, a curious paradox has emerged that shapes how millions of people understand the past. The same technologies that make historical documents, archaeological findings, and scholarly research more accessible than ever before have also enabled the rapid spread of claims that the entire historical record is fundamentally unreliable, fabricated by shadowy elites to control humanity through manufactured ignorance of its true origins. Videos with millions of views argue that everything taught in schools about ancient civilizations, medieval empires, and modern nations is a carefully constructed lie designed to keep people enslaved to false narratives. Social media algorithms amplify these claims, rewarding content that generates emotional engagement regardless of its relationship to evidence or truth. The result is a growing population of people who believe they have discovered hidden knowledge that mainstream scholars either cannot see or refuse to acknowledge, people convinced that they are awakening from a collective dream while everyone around them remains trapped in comfortable illusions. But this narrative of universal historical deception, however emotionally satisfying it may be to those who embrace it, collapses entirely when examined against the actual methods by which historical knowledge is produced, verified, and challenged. The historical record is not a monolithic construction imposed by central authorities. It is a vast, complex, often contradictory accumulation of evidence produced by millions of people across thousands of years, preserved through countless independent channels, and subjected to continuous critical scrutiny by scholars with every incentive to expose errors and frauds. Far from being less reliable than conspiracy theorists claim, the historical record is in many ways more reliable than the average person realizes, precisely because of the rigorous methods that historians have developed to evaluate evidence and the competitive dynamics that reward those who successfully challenge established narratives. The fundamental misunderstanding underlying claims of historical fraud is the assumption that historical knowledge is produced and maintained by a unified authority with the power to control what people believe about the past. This model of centralized knowledge production might describe certain authoritarian regimes that have attempted to rewrite history for political purposes, attempts that historians have extensively documented and analyzed precisely because they represent violations of normal scholarly practice. But it does not describe how historical knowledge actually works in the broader world, where thousands of independent researchers working in hundreds of institutions across dozens of countries produce scholarship that is evaluated through competitive peer review and open debate. These researchers disagree about countless questions of interpretation, methodology, and emphasis. They come from different national, cultural, religious, and political backgrounds that shape their perspectives and interests. They are trained in different scholarly traditions with different assumptions about what constitutes valid evidence and sound reasoning. The idea that all of these independent actors, many of whom are bitter intellectual rivals engaged in fierce debates about fundamental questions, have somehow coordinated to maintain a unified false narrative about human history defies everything we know about how academic institutions and human organizations actually function. The evidence that historians use to reconstruct the past comes from an extraordinarily diverse range of sources that would be impossible for any conspiracy to fabricate or control. Written documents survive in archives, libraries, private collections, and archaeological sites across the world, produced by people from every level of society for purposes ranging from official record-keeping to personal correspondence to creative expression. These documents were written in hundreds of languages using dozens of different scripts, preserved through independent channels of transmission that had no contact with one another, and discovered through random processes of survival and recovery that no central authority could have orchestrated. Archaeological evidence provides an entirely independent category of information about the past, recovered through scientific excavation and analyzed using techniques from physics, chemistry, biology, and other disciplines that have no connection to traditional historical scholarship. Oral traditions preserved by communities around the world offer yet another independent source of historical knowledge, transmitting information across generations through mechanisms completely different from those governing written records. The convergence of these independent sources on consistent accounts of the past provides powerful confirmation that the basic outlines of human history as reconstructed by scholars correspond to events that actually occurred. The methods that historians use to evaluate evidence have been refined over centuries of practice and are designed precisely to detect the kinds of fraud and fabrication that conspiracy theorists imagine pervade the entire historical record. Paleographers study the physical characteristics of handwriting to date documents and identify the regions and traditions in which they were produced, detecting forgeries through anachronistic letter forms, inconsistent abbreviation practices, and other telltale signs that reveal when a document does not belong to the period it claims to represent. Codicologists examine the physical construction of manuscripts, analyzing parchment preparation, binding techniques, and other material features that can independently confirm or contradict the dating suggested by textual content. Philologists study the language of texts, identifying vocabulary, grammar, and stylistic features that reveal when a work was composed and whether it has been altered or interpolated by later editors. These technical disciplines have successfully exposed numerous forgeries and frauds throughout the history of scholarship, from medieval monks who fabricated documents to support their monasteries' land claims to modern con artists who have produced fake Hitler diaries and counterfeit antiquities. The very fact that historians can and do detect forgeries demonstrates that their methods work, that the careful analysis of evidence can distinguish genuine historical documents from later fabrications. The competitive dynamics of academic scholarship provide powerful incentives for the exposure of errors and frauds that would undermine any coordinated effort to maintain false historical narratives. Academic careers are built on the publication of original research that advances knowledge beyond what previous scholars have established. The surest path to professional recognition is to challenge established interpretations with new evidence or more compelling analysis, to show that previous researchers were wrong about important questions. Scholars who successfully overturn accepted narratives become famous within their fields, attracting students, grants, and prestigious appointments. Those who expose major frauds become intellectual heroes, celebrated for their detective work and methodological rigor. These incentives create a scholarly culture that is inherently skeptical of received wisdom and constantly probing for weaknesses in established interpretations. If the mainstream historical narrative were as fragile and fraudulent as conspiracy theorists claim, ambitious scholars would have torn it apart long ago in their quest for professional advancement. The stability of core historical knowledge reflects not the success of suppression but the robustness of evidence that has survived centuries of critical scrutiny by researchers with every incentive to find flaws. The international character of historical scholarship makes coordinated fraud essentially impossible to maintain over any significant period of time. Historians working in different countries have access to different archives, different scholarly traditions, and different political pressures that shape their research. Russian historians studying the Napoleonic Wars have access to Russian military archives that French historians cannot easily consult, while French historians have access to French sources that their Russian counterparts must work harder to obtain. Chinese historians studying the Ming Dynasty draw on sources and methods quite different from those used by American or European historians approaching the same period. These independent scholarly communities produce research that can be compared and cross-checked, revealing inconsistencies and errors that would be invisible within any single national tradition. International conferences, translated publications, and collaborative research projects bring scholars from different backgrounds into direct contact, forcing them to defend their interpretations against challenges from researchers with different assumptions and access to different evidence. A fraud that might escape detection within one national scholarly community would almost certainly be exposed when subjected to scrutiny from researchers working in different contexts with different sources. The preservation of historical records has occurred through channels far too numerous and diverse for any central authority to control, even if such an authority had wished to do so. Religious institutions have maintained archives documenting their internal governance, property holdings, and spiritual activities for centuries, often in tension or open conflict with secular authorities who had no power to dictate what these institutions preserved. Noble and royal families have maintained their own records documenting lineage, property, and political relationships, records essential for establishing legal rights that could not simply be fabricated without contradicting other independent sources. Commercial enterprises from medieval trading companies to modern corporations have maintained financial records necessary for conducting business, records that would be useless if they did not accurately reflect actual transactions. Private individuals have kept diaries, correspondence, and personal papers that document their lives and observations, preserving perspectives often quite different from official accounts. The survival of documents through these independent channels means that falsification of the historical record would require coordinating the actions of institutions and individuals who were often rivals or enemies, an impossible task even for the most powerful conspirators. Archaeological evidence provides particularly strong confirmation of the historical record because it is produced through scientific methods entirely independent of traditional documentary scholarship. Excavations recover physical objects that were buried in the ground centuries or millennia ago, objects whose characteristics can be analyzed using laboratory techniques from chemistry, physics, and biology. Radiocarbon dating measures the decay of carbon-14 isotopes to determine when organic materials were last part of living organisms, providing age estimates independent of any historical interpretation. Dendrochronology uses the patterns of tree rings to date wooden objects and correlate them with climatic records extending back thousands of years. Thermoluminescence dating measures the accumulation of radiation in mineral crystals to determine when ceramic objects were last heated during firing. These scientific dating methods were developed by researchers with no stake in historical debates, working on problems in physics and chemistry that had nothing to do with archaeology. The fact that they consistently confirm the chronology established through traditional historical methods provides powerful independent validation that this chronology corresponds to actual events rather than fabricated narratives. The consistency of the historical record across independent sources is a phenomenon that no conspiracy theory can adequately explain. Events described in European sources are corroborated by Middle Eastern, Asian, and African sources that had no knowledge of each other's accounts. Archaeological discoveries confirm details mentioned in written sources that were produced centuries before those sites were excavated. Scientific analysis of materials and objects confirms datings and identifications proposed by scholars working from purely textual evidence. This web of mutual confirmation spanning different cultures, different types of evidence, and different scholarly disciplines would require a conspiracy of impossible scope and coordination to fabricate. The alternative explanation, that the historical record is consistent because it describes events that actually happened, is vastly more plausible and requires no appeal to shadowy forces with superhuman capabilities. Historians do not claim that the record is perfect or complete. They acknowledge gaps, uncertainties, and areas where evidence is sparse or ambiguous. But the basic reliability of the record for events that are well documented is supported by precisely the kind of independent confirmation that rational inquiry demands. The process by which historical knowledge has been accumulated over centuries provides further evidence of its fundamental reliability. Each generation of scholars has built on the work of previous generations while also correcting errors and challenging interpretations that no longer seem adequate in light of new evidence or better methods. Medieval chroniclers preserved accounts of earlier events that they believed important for their own purposes, transmitting information that would otherwise have been lost. Renaissance humanists developed critical methods for evaluating ancient texts, distinguishing authentic works from later forgeries and reconstructing corrupted passages through careful comparison of manuscripts. Enlightenment historians applied rational analysis to traditional narratives, rejecting miraculous elements while preserving the factual core of events that could be documented through surviving sources. Modern scholars have continued this process of critical refinement, using ever more sophisticated methods to extract reliable information from imperfect sources. This cumulative process of correction and refinement is completely inconsistent with a model of centralized control and fabrication. It shows instead a dynamic tradition of inquiry that has consistently improved the accuracy and reliability of historical knowledge over time. The specific claims made by conspiracy theorists about historical fraud typically reveal profound misunderstandings of how historical scholarship actually works. Claims that ancient or medieval structures could not have been built with the technology of their time reflect ignorance of construction techniques that are thoroughly documented in period sources and confirmed by experimental archaeology. Claims that historical timelines have been fabricated ignore the multiple independent lines of evidence, including astronomical records, dendrochronology, and radiocarbon dating, that confirm established chronologies. Claims that entire civilizations have been erased from history ignore the archaeological, genetic, and linguistic evidence that documents human populations across time and space with increasing precision. Each of these claims rests on a misunderstanding that dissolves when examined against actual evidence and methods. The conspiracy theorists are not revealing hidden truths that scholars have missed or suppressed. They are demonstrating their own unfamiliarity with the vast body of evidence and methodology that underlies mainstream historical knowledge. The motivations that drive conspiracy theories about history deserve understanding even as the theories themselves are refuted. Many people who embrace these theories are responding to genuine concerns about institutional trustworthiness that have become more acute in recent decades. Revelations of government deception, corporate malfeasance, and academic fraud have undermined public confidence in authorities of all kinds. Social and economic dislocations have left many people feeling powerless and suspicious of elites who seem to control their lives without accountability. The internet has exposed people to information that challenges comfortable assumptions while also exposing them to misinformation that exploits their vulnerabilities. In this environment, theories that explain apparent contradictions through hidden agency can provide psychological comfort, offering a sense of understanding and control in a world that seems chaotic and threatening. The appeal of these theories is emotional and social rather than evidential, rooted in needs that genuine historical knowledge cannot satisfy in the same way. Addressing the spread of historical misinformation requires understanding these motivations and responding to the underlying anxieties rather than simply correcting factual errors. The distinction between healthy skepticism and conspiratorial thinking is crucial for navigating the contemporary information environment. Healthy skepticism questions claims that lack adequate evidence, demands documentation for extraordinary assertions, and remains open to revising beliefs in light of new information. Conspiratorial thinking, by contrast, rejects all evidence that contradicts its preferred narrative, interprets any absence of evidence as proof of concealment, and treats the consistency of mainstream accounts as evidence of coordination rather than accuracy. Healthy skepticism leads to better understanding over time as evidence accumulates and is properly evaluated. Conspiratorial thinking leads to an ever-expanding web of suspicion that becomes immune to any possible refutation. The historical record should be approached with healthy skepticism, questioning specific claims, examining evidence carefully, and remaining alert to the possibility of error or bias. But wholesale rejection of the historical record based on unfounded suspicions of global fraud represents a descent into conspiratorial thinking that cuts the thinker off from genuine knowledge of the past. The educational system plays a crucial role in developing the critical thinking skills necessary for evaluating historical claims, though this role is often imperfectly fulfilled. Students who learn history as a set of facts to be memorized are ill-equipped to understand how those facts were established or to evaluate challenges to them. Students who learn history as a process of inquiry, examining evidence, considering alternative interpretations, and understanding the methods by which knowledge is produced, are far better prepared to distinguish reliable information from misinformation. The best history education teaches not just what happened in the past but how we know what happened, introducing students to the sources and methods that underlie historical knowledge. This kind of education inoculates against conspiracy theories by demonstrating that historical knowledge is not arbitrary or imposed but emerges from careful, verifiable investigation of surviving evidence. Improving history education is thus not just a matter of transmitting cultural heritage but of developing intellectual capacities essential for citizenship in a democracy constantly threatened by misinformation. The digital environment has transformed how people encounter and evaluate information about the past in ways that create both opportunities and dangers. Digitization projects have made millions of historical documents available online, allowing anyone with internet access to examine primary sources that were previously accessible only to scholars with the resources to travel to distant archives. This democratization of access has tremendous potential for expanding public engagement with historical evidence and enabling independent verification of scholarly claims. At the same time, the same technologies that provide access to genuine historical sources also provide platforms for misinformation that can be made to look equally authoritative. A well-produced video claiming that ancient buildings prove the existence of lost civilizations can reach millions of viewers before any scholar has the opportunity to respond, and the response may never reach the same audience even if it is eventually produced. Navigating this environment requires digital literacy skills that many people have not had the opportunity to develop, including the ability to evaluate sources, recognize manipulation, and understand the difference between genuine expertise and confident assertion. The ultimate answer to conspiracy theories about history is not simply to assert the authority of experts but to demonstrate the methods and evidence that underlie historical knowledge. When people understand how radiocarbon dating works, they can evaluate claims about chronological fraud for themselves rather than taking anyone's word on faith. When people understand how paleographers detect forgeries, they can appreciate why scholars trust certain documents while rejecting others. When people understand the competitive dynamics of academic scholarship, they can see why coordinated suppression of inconvenient truths would be impossible to maintain. This kind of understanding is more demanding than either blind trust in authority or sweeping rejection of all expertise, but it is the only genuine path to reliable knowledge about the past. The historical record is not a matter of faith to be accepted or rejected wholesale. It is an accumulation of evidence that can be examined, evaluated, and understood by anyone willing to invest the effort required for serious inquiry. The reliability of the historical record matters not just for academic debates but for the practical business of living together in society. Shared understanding of the past provides the foundation for collective identity, political legitimacy, and moral reasoning about present challenges. Societies that lose confidence in their ability to know what actually happened become vulnerable to manipulation by those who would fabricate histories to serve their own purposes. The totalitarian regimes of the 20th century demonstrated the dangers of allowing political authorities to control historical narratives, rewriting the past to justify present atrocities and erasing inconvenient truths from collective memory. The defense against such manipulation is not universal suspicion of all historical knowledge but the cultivation of methods that can distinguish reliable accounts from propaganda and fabrication. These methods exist, have been refined over centuries of practice, and work when properly applied. The historical record produced through these methods is not perfect, but it is far more reliable than the alternatives offered by those who reject evidence-based inquiry in favor of speculation and suspicion. The accumulated knowledge about human history represents one of the great achievements of civilization, a collective endeavor spanning generations and cultures to understand how we came to be who we are. This knowledge is not a prison that constrains human thought but a foundation that makes further inquiry possible. Understanding what actually happened in the past allows us to learn from experience, both our own and that of countless generations who came before. It allows us to appreciate the achievements of our ancestors while also recognizing their failures and limitations. It allows us to see patterns and possibilities that would be invisible without the perspective that only historical knowledge can provide. Rejecting this accumulated knowledge in favor of conspiracy theories does not liberate the mind. It impoverishes it, cutting off access to the vast repository of human experience that constitutes our collective heritage. The methods by which historical knowledge is produced and evaluated are themselves products of historical development, refined through centuries of practice and reflection. Early historians mixed legend with fact, accepted tradition uncritically, and lacked the tools to distinguish reliable sources from later inventions. Over time, scholars developed increasingly sophisticated methods for evaluating evidence, comparing sources, and detecting fabrication. The critical methods pioneered during the Renaissance, refined during the Enlightenment, and further developed in modern professional scholarship represent genuine progress in the human capacity to know the past accurately. These methods are not perfect and continue to evolve as new challenges emerge and new techniques become available. But they are immeasurably superior to the alternative of accepting or rejecting historical claims based on emotional resonance or ideological convenience. The historical record is reliable precisely because it has been produced through methods designed to maximize accuracy and minimize error, methods that anyone can learn and apply. The appropriate response to claims that we have been lied to about history is neither defensive dismissal nor credulous acceptance but careful examination of the specific claims against the available evidence. Some claims of historical deception have proven true when examined rigorously, revealing genuine instances of propaganda, concealment, or fraud that scholars have worked to expose and correct. Other claims have proven false, based on misunderstandings of evidence, ignorance of context, or deliberate fabrication by those seeking attention or profit. Distinguishing between these categories requires the same methods that historians use in their professional work: careful attention to sources, critical evaluation of arguments, and openness to revising conclusions in light of new evidence. These methods are not the exclusive property of credentialed professionals. They are tools that anyone can learn and use to evaluate claims about the past. The historical record stands up to this scrutiny not because it is protected by powerful institutions but because it is grounded in evidence that can be independently verified by anyone willing to do the work. The story of how humans have come to know their past is itself a fascinating historical subject, revealing the gradual development of methods and institutions that make reliable knowledge possible. From the chronicle traditions of ancient civilizations through the critical scholarship of the Renaissance to the professional historiography of the modern university, each era has contributed to the accumulation of knowledge and the refinement of methods. This story includes failures and setbacks as well as successes, moments when false narratives prevailed and important truths were obscured. But the overall trajectory has been toward greater accuracy, more sophisticated methods, and broader access to evidence that allows claims to be independently evaluated. Understanding this trajectory provides both confidence in the basic reliability of current historical knowledge and humility about the possibility that future generations will correct errors that we have not yet recognized. The historical record is not a closed book but an ongoing project of inquiry that each generation inherits and advances. The reliability of the historical record ultimately rests on the same foundations that support all human knowledge: the careful observation of evidence, the systematic comparison of sources, and the willingness to revise conclusions when they no longer fit the facts. These foundations are not arbitrary or culturally relative. They reflect basic features of rational inquiry that have proven their value across many domains of human knowledge. The same principles that allow scientists to understand nature allow historians to understand the past, and the success of these principles in one domain provides confidence in their applicability to others. We have not been lied to about history because the methods that produce historical knowledge would detect and expose systematic fraud. We have not been lied to because the competitive dynamics of scholarship reward those who expose errors and fabrications. We have not been lied to because the evidence is too abundant, too diverse, and too independently confirmed to have been fabricated by any conceivable conspiracy. The historical record is more reliable than many people realize, not because powerful institutions have decreed it so, but because it has been produced through methods that work and has survived scrutiny that would have exposed fundamental falsehoods. This is not a call for uncritical acceptance but for informed confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from understanding how knowledge is made and why the methods that produce it deserve respect.